Hey guys, Ken here from the Retro Toys Escapades channel in Malaysia. On the channel today, there's some absolutely incredible news to cover for fans of the Silverhawks as we see a return to the classic style of Kenner figures from the 80s with Super 7's freshly announced wave of ReAction figures. Now, Silverhawks as a pop culture property was lying dormant for many years since it originally ended in 1988. But a few short years ago in 2022, we started to see new product being developed again, specially for the fans, starting with Ramen Toys' 7-inch scale Quicksilver figure, which raised the bar for what collectors could expect from a modern-day Silverhawks toy. The Ramen Quicksilver figure did not have wax metal like the original, but it did come with a very nice metallic paint finishing, which was probably the next best compromise. Then, in early 2023, Super 7 finally delivered their long-awaited Silverhawks Ultimates Wave 1 and 2 series of figures back to back. I was looking forward to this for a very long time, and I was honored to have the very first ever video reviews on YouTube of both Quicksilver and Monstar. Now, I was very happy with the work on the figures. However, a lot of people greatly disliked the paint applications that were on the Super 7 Quicksilver figure because what was promised to them was something revolutionary, a paint process that would incorporate elements of a pearl silver-like paint finishing, a paint process that would still give the figure something of a shiny reflective surface, something along those lines. I think that's what they said, all right? I'm not really sure what they were going for because the final finished product mostly just turned out looking like a dull shade of grey. Now, I personally did not really have that much of a problem with it, but a lot of people out there did, okay? And the figure just ended up taking a lot of flack, okay? More flack than being blasted by Monstar himself in space, okay? Super 7's original explanation, I believe, was that they did not want to coat the figure in vac metal as that would limit its posability, and also they couldn't figure out a way as to how to apply that much vac metal onto the figure without having the vac metal itself deteriorate and be damaged when the figure was being operated. So, that sort of made sense, I guess. But then, a short while later, they went ahead and announced that they would be reissuing some of those early Silverhawks figures, except that this time around, they would be coming with back metal bodies, alright? So, and you can see how this thing was just frustrating to a lot of people. You'd basically be buying the same figures all over again, except that this time, they would come with vac metal, and also they would cost a lot more too because vac metal ain't cheap, alright? Now, anyway, the Silverhawks Ultimates line for Super 7 has proven to be very popular. I believe they're on wave 4 right now. They just released the Copper Kit along with the Space Racer, so that line is going strong for sure. And Silverhawks overall continues to have a resurgence in visibility because this month, January 2025, sees the launch of an all-new comic book series from Dynamite Entertainment. Following on their success with Thundercats, they're now introducing the Silverhawks back to comics, and they also promise a crossover with the Thundercats universe itself. So lots of exciting stuff happening with the Silverhawks franchise. And now with the latest announcement today, it seems like things are coming full circle. They're going back to the classic style of Silverhawks figures from the 80s with this all-new line from ReAction that comprises of 4 figures in total in Wave 1. Now, just to provide a bit of background on ReAction, for those of you out there who may not be familiar with this brand, now ReAction is of course owned by Super 7 together with Funko, and they initially started out sometime like about 10 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, their first offerings were the Alien figures, and these were actually supposed to be the company's attempt to introduce modern-day collectors to the classic action figure styles of the 80s, and specifically in the style that Star Wars figures were first given to fans as 3 3/4 inch figures with 5 points of articulation, pretty minimalistic sculpting, but just fun overall to handle. And this style will also translate to the way the figures were packaged on card, with the action figure on one side of the card and the rest of the card being taken over by a glorious full frontal image of the character itself. Okay, this is the classic way that Star Wars figures were presented back in the day. And sometime like about a decade ago, ReAction probably started out with just a few pop culture licenses from across the worlds of movies, television, cartoons, and classic toys. Today, they probably have like about 100 licenses, right? Just about anything that you can think of. And just to give you an idea of how a ReAction figure actually looks like in hand, here's a comparison between the ReAction Pinhead movie figure and Kenner's Star Wars Power of the Force Luke Skywalker in X-Wing suit. You can see that they're both of the same 3 3/4 inch size, have the same 5 points of articulation and roughly the same sculpting style. Now here's the Borodon next to the Canon Silverhawks Bluegrass figure from 1987. The Bluegrass figure looks absolutely massive, okay, compared to these guys. And that's because he's a 5.5 inch scale figure. At this point, Canon was putting out larger figures that still had the limited 5 points of articulation in their movement, but the poses were in fact a bit more dynamic. So now, with the ReAction wave, we'll be getting the Silverhawks of the 80s back again at a smaller size scale, same amount of limited articulation, but also with less dynamic pre-sculpted poses. Now the packaging artwork of all of the characters of course looks fantastic. Even if you don't like the ReAction action figure style, the artwork on their cards is always what pulls you in, inevitably. Now the images of the figures seen here are of course 3D renders, but there is also another promotional picture they have put out which has the prototypes of the actual figures. Now the Silverhawks characters all appear to come with bases included, which is great. Although I don't know if the final toys will also have the bases, or are these just here for these photo sessions. Now the 3 Silverhawks characters all come with their weapon bird accessories. Bluegrass has Hot Licks, Steelheart has Razor, and Quicksilver has Tallyhawk. However, I am disappointed that the figures do not come with wings, as this is without a doubt a key and iconic part of the character's design. And all of the vintage Kenner figures also had the classic wings deployment action feature where you could have the wings spread open for attack when you squeeze their legs together. And you know what? It's still so awesome to see this feature in action even after all these decades. Now, I don't expect the ReAction figures to be able to do this, but it is disappointing that the wings were not at least included with the sculpt. But, you know, some of these ReAction figures don't even come with any accessories, right? So I suppose having their weapon bird companions here is something of a bonus. However, the main draw of these figures based on the photo that's provided here is of course the inclusion of Whack Metal, right? That's right, they're giving us the Whack Metal straight up. They're not making us wait for a second series of reissued figures or anything like that. They're giving us the Whack Metal straight up right now. And I have to tell you, that is a pretty irresistible prospect because the Whack Metal was one of the most memorable parts of owning Silverhawks figures back in the 80s. Aside from the spread open wings action feature, the Whack Metal was what you remember the most. Although, I have to say, honestly speaking, the Whack Metal on those old figures really didn't stand the test of time. And on some of the figures here, like Bluegrass, you know, maybe it's because the Whack Metal is in blue, so it hides a lot of the imperfections, but he still looks pretty good even after all this time. But on characters like Quicksilver, man, you can really see the rot set in. Okay. And also, yeah, definitely these are loose figures. It all depends on who the original owners were and how they took care of their figures. But having said that, at the same time, having this much Whack Metal on a figure that's designed for play is probably not a great idea to begin with. Okay. It looks great, but I don't think the execution was meant to stand the test of time. Now, if you thought the Whack Metal deterioration on the classic figures looked bad, that's nothing compared to the wear and tear that the cloth wings could be subjected to. As you can see from these old figures, the fabric was utterly destroyed over time, right? That's right, okay? This is some serious disintegration that's happening here, and that's why I was so excited at the possibility of having new fabric cloth wings included with this ReAction set, but sadly, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Now, Silverhawks is filled with a cast of really colorful villains, but the one sole bad guy that we're getting in this first wave of ReAction figures is the malicious Monster. What's interesting about Monster here is that they've included his pre-transformation mode, before he changes into this supermassive hulking armored beast and just starts trashing the universe. Okay, so this particular mode, the pre-transformation mode, was something that Canon never produced as an action figure back in the day. So it's interesting to get him in this particular scale and in the classic 80s Canon style. Super 7 did, of course, release a gigantic pre-transformed Monster as part of their SilverhawksUltimates 7-inch scale line a couple of years ago, and I did review this on the channel back then as well. But this is the first time that we're getting a chance to own this particular look of the character in this scale, and that's something I think a lot of fans are going to appreciate. For me personally, the fact that we're getting Whack Metal on these figures is just about enough to get me all in. But guys, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section. What do you think of this new wave of Silverhawks ReAction figures that are coming out? Hit me up in the comments, and I'll catch you guys again real soon. Take care out there.